So for the second panel, we're going to be looking at new configurations of transnational and transdiasporic activism that are emerging in different spaces. And we're going to be looking in particular at certain urban spaces and national spaces, but as well as virtual spaces, and how these are changing the types of activism that are emerging, the models for activism, but also the different solidarities that are emerging across diaspora groups. We have a speaker. The first speaker will be Zeynep Ali, who is the co-founder of SPACE and the Citizenship Academy in Norway. Then Said Mahmouda Sahami, who is a PhD candidate at the University of Manchester and who is working on the Egyptian exile community in Berlin and in Istanbul. And then Diane Abbas, who is the co-founder of Impact Lebanon and the new Sauti initiative that is coming out of that. So I'll go ahead now and give the floor to Zeynep.
Yes, hi, thank you, Sarah. I hope you can see me, and I would like to share my screen, so I also hope technology won't fail us. Okay, can you see, yeah, PDF? Yes, okay, perfect. Thank you again, Sarah, and the Arab Reform Initiative for creating this space for us to share our experience and also learn from others. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Zeynep Ali, and I live in Norway. I'm the director of the SPACE organization. I know it's a weird name. I'm coming to this now. It has nothing to do with the outer space. But this is how I'm going to talk in my presentation about how we started this initiative SPACE, the beginning of our story, and how it developed from a Syrian-based initiative to becoming more of an organization that is engaging with the Arab diaspora at large in Norway, and then talking specifically about the Citizen Academy project, which is an ongoing project of ours. So this is the three main points I'm going to cover. Just to start, it's good to have some faces behind this organization. So we are a group of basically diasporic academics, activists, and people with interest in arts and culture who come from different areas in the Levant, basically who are based in Norway. So when I came in 2015 to Norway, like many other Syrians, I met already two of the co-founding members, Rana Isa and Murhab Faris, who were starting like a small initiative to start talking about Syria in a different way. As we might imagine, I think Norway, similarly to many other European countries, the dominant narrative about Syria back then was that it's just a struggle or a war between Assad and jihadists, and Assad is the lesser of two evils. Absent of this whole very simplified narrative was the voices of ordinary Syrians, intellectuals, activists, artists, and basically just the voices of ordinary Syrians. So what we wanted to do by creating SPACE or establishing SPACE is to emphasize or revive that space that the Syrian people have claimed for the first time in 2011, when we went to the streets and occupied the streets, basically, and the public space, an arena that has never been available to the public for decades. So we wanted to emphasize that the Syrian people have gained these democratic rights in 2011, and even though we are in exile today, the reality has changed, but we want to still revive and maintain these gains. And the second thing, we also wanted to kind of reclaim the space from so many different arrangements and kind of arenas that they were talking about Syria in Oslo, like cultural festivals and debates and political and kind of more like panels organized by research institutes. There was a lot of engagement around Syria, but there were never Syrians on stage. So we wanted to find our space or reclaim our space in these kind of initiatives. So we started then to organize different cultural and artistic activities around Syria. So on two levels. The first level was that we collaborated with different cultural festivals, where we always ensured that the focus on Syria included a Syrian voice. And we had our own conference as well, annual conference that was called The Question of Syria, that was open to the public. And on the second level, we had more specialist seminars and panel debates in collaboration with research institutes and advocacy, kind of closed advocacy meetings as well with policymakers. This is, I think, the second slide. We also are lucky to have a very dedicated advisory board from different Norwegians from different also disciplines, arts and activism and policy making. Yeah, so this is basically what I was saying about how we started. This is a map of Norway that I will come back to. It's an interesting fact that Norway is a very large country when it comes to its area. It's larger than Germany. However, with the population, it's a very small country. It's a 5 million, more or less 5 million people who live here. And the map you're seeing right now is it's the dispersion of the Syrians who arrived in Norway. After 2015, more than 30,000 Syrians have arrived in Norway. And it's a big number compared to 1,000 Syrians who lived in Norway before 2011. So the number has kind of 30 times doubled, if I can say this. And as a policy as well by the Norwegian government to disperse the refugee population, Syrians were settled in 400 municipalities out of 420 municipalities. So in every single kind of area in Norway, you would find a Syrian family. Now, of course, this map is from 2009, changed a little bit. But this just to kind of mention one of is that it was at the beginning when we started, it was a bit difficult to engage with the Syrian population that has just basically arrived. People were still finding their places, they were still learning the language, were settling in, applying for studies and jobs, etc. And of course, with the geographic dispersion, it was another challenge because the distances are huge. So that's why we kind of we're trying, our focus in the beginning was more on kind of Norway's engagement in Syria. So it was more like one of the speakers, I think, mentioned in the first panel is how, you know, people find their relationship with the new host country in a different way. And I think we kind of established our relationship to Norway through Syria. So it was mostly talking about, yeah, foreign politics. This is like just some pictures from our annual conference, The Question of Syria, where every year we try to invite different Syrian grassroots activists, intellectuals, artists, etc. And here are some of the scenes. And also one thing to mention is arts and culture were inseparable for us since the first day, because we also see it as a very valuable, priceless kind of byproduct of the Syrian revolution since the first day. People were chanting and creating new lyrics and new songs based on the political context and based on, of course, all the revolutions goals and aspirations. So we always used arts and culture as a way to inspire us and also to inspire our audiences, and of course as a way to keep talking about how Syrians are creating new ways to express themselves. So here are some just examples, also film screenings and so on. Now to move a little bit, I talked a lot about how we started mainly focusing about Syria, but how this has actually evolved is that by the time we were organizing these events and they were quite popular, we had a lot of audience, a lot of interaction. And then we started also to meet more and more Arab, like members of the Arab diaspora, people from Libya, from Sudan, from Egypt. It was a great learning experience for us to actually also start learning about other countries through informal conversations, because we discovered as people, I lived my entire life in Syria until I left in 2012. And I thought I know something about Palestine because, you know, we learned a lot about it at school, and it was mostly the main cause that we were taking to the streets to kind of be in solidarity always with the Palestinian people. But I only learned or started learning about it in a proper way when I met Palestinians in Oslo. So also kind of also offered us that space where we could learn about each other without censorship and without ideologies and with just open conversations. And this was also the point where people from other diasporas kind of liked what we do about Syria, and they started telling us, okay, we also want to do the same. We also want to bring and highlight the Libyan voices, for example, in the narrative. And here I think I'm sharing an example by one of the people or one of the friends of Space who we met through also events in Space. His name is Karim Saridin. He's from Libya. And we helped him, we collaborated a bit, but he organized like also a panel about Libya, because there was a lot of engagement around Libya, again, in Norway, but very little, maybe never we would see Libyan voices on stage. So that was also like an initiative of his that was very popular, of course, and got a lot of attention and interaction. So this kind of also inspired us that, you know, the same narrative that we see about Syria, that's top-down analysis, mostly in Norway, you would either see like humanitarian aid engaging with the Middle East, like picturing an entire region just through, you know, victimhood and suffering and indistinguishable voices and faces, or you would see geopolitical ethno kind of religious perspectives or approaches toward the region. But again, we see very like the same problem basically that we saw with Syria was just a prevalent problem that is through the whole region, even though Norway again has a lot of engagement in the region, but when you come to the public debate, there is just very little visibility for these voices. And another thing is that we started also meeting more and more people who, yes, have newly arrived to Norway, but we're able to now more think also about this kind of their identity, their political engagement, because now they are more stable, they have a job, they have a study, etc. They're living, they found their place in Norway. So we also started to think it's about time that we can actually create this network of people around Norway from different Arab that can be more visible and more active in the public debate in Norway. And for me in particular, as it was also very important to kind of open up a bit and learn from others and try to collaborate, because we also had it, we heard it a little, like very few times, I think, when we started in Lebanon, that some Syrians would come to us and tell us, but why are you talking about Palestine? Have to focus on Syria. And I think this is something that we have suffered from a lot of authoritarian regimes for so long, that we feel that, you know, our causes are in or in competition. So for us, the Citizen Academy to kind of bridge all these gaps, knowledge, and also in kind of cross-national solidarity. So the Citizen Academy is basically with the intentions to activate this Arab diaspora and also explore new notions of citizenship, because to be a citizen in Norway is a very different experience than being a citizen in any Arab country. And I think I speak for myself and many others as well, I still have new encounters, and I haven't internalized yet what it means to actually be a citizen of a democratic country. And I still learn a lot about my relationship to the public institutions here in Norway, and my duties and my rights. So that was also like one aspect that we wanted to explore with also other newly arrived Arabs in Norway. And to also mention something very important is that we see this as a pilot program. We're not the ones who are bringing the expertise, but we're actually learning also from the participants. So we launched an online call that was in last summer 2020. And we received 54 applications from basically Arab diaspora in all over Norway, different cities. And we ended up with 14 participants coming from Algeria, Sudan, Yemen, Syria, Palestine, mostly. And yes, I'm almost done. And yes, and the idea of the academy is to have 4 gatherings. In each gathering, we have a theme, and we discuss this theme over 2 days through different workshops and discussions and lectures. But the important thing that we're also trying to do here is to discuss the same theme from the perspective of the MENA region and from the perspective from Norway. For example, freedom of expression. The first day we had guests talking to us about the freedom of expression in media and culture in different Arab countries. And then the second day we had Norwegian guests talking to us about this concept in the Norwegian context. So it was also an attempt from us to acknowledge that we have our own histories and connections to the region, that we cannot just overcome and pretend that we're starting from zero here in Norway. Like much of the kind of integration debate wants us to forget everything we have and start from zero. So yeah, it's a very, I can talk more about maybe the academy later in the Q&A, what we have achieved so far. We had 2 gatherings and still now we have 2 gatherings to come. Here are just some pictures. I'm not going to talk a lot about it, and you can explore. Yeah, I think just the last 2 points I want to say is that the ambition for us is to have it as an annual tradition, and of course to create the extensions and the collaborations to other diasporas in Europe that have actually always been a source of inspiration for us. Diaspora in Berlin and the UK and Paris, we've been always also looking at them and seeing what we can do in Norway. So that's all for me. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Zaina. I think there's going to be a lot of follow-up questions to get into more depth about your Citizen Academy. But we'll pass now on to Saeed.
You hear me well, right? Greetings, everybody. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, the Arab Reform Initiative, for the invitation. I'm really delighted to be here and to learn more about the mediated diasporas. So for this presentation inspired by my MA fieldwork in late 2019 in Berlin, particularly or even exclusively in Neukölln and Kreuzberg neighborhoods, which are like migrant neighborhoods, Turkish, Syrians, and Iraqi, Egyptian migrants almost there. So my research focus on Egyptian political exiles since 2013. I was trying to explore the emerging political subjectivities and becomings of these groups of activists in Berlin. First asking how they left Egypt, why they left trajectories before, and their stories in exile. I mean by exile because I focused mainly on activists who were forced simply to escape of repression in Egypt since the military coup in 2013. The people I met, most of them came to Berlin since 2015, 2016, basically with the escalating of repression in Egypt. For this short presentation, I focus only on somehow one dimension of this emerging political subjectivity and becoming in exile, which is the undoing of exile. Undoing of exile, basically, the personal experience of fighting exile, trying to adopt with the exile conditions and transferring them for one's own. For me, I am an anthropologist. I'm doing my PhD now, continuing on the Egyptian exiles in Istanbul and in Berlin. So I was interested in exploring the lives of my intellectual circles, their self-change in exile. So I was asking how exile brings new forms of resistance. Before asking how exile brings new forms of resistance and activism, I asked how exile actually shaped the lives of activists and people in a different way, and through this change, how they deal with this change and make it for their own favor, of course, politically and personally. So exile can be an opportunity of starting life anew, literally from scratch, which is of course a difficult and a terrible feeling, but also has its own benefits on the political norms. Undoing of exile happens in parallel to, not in despite of, not instead of, experiencing intense feelings of terror, worries, insecurities, and confusion. Sometimes it's even because of these intensities, individuals expand their worlds. It is somehow like being relatively oppressed, make oneself to identify with the oppressed in general. This identification is productive, I think, in the sense it widens one's own perspective of what the political can and what the political might be. In Cairo, I was told that it's a city that never sleeps, but in Berlin, it's not only Cairo that a city that never sleeps. Berlin especially is a a peculiar and dynamic space full of opportunities. People are from everywhere, in which you can easily feel that everybody is an activist. Everybody has something to do critically. Always on the move, something is happening all the time in Berlin. Global politics in the everyday conversations and narratives of the people. Going to bars means that you are getting politicized by a way or another. Berlin, somehow, it's a relative space of freedom. No one can deny this, but also it's a new place of different struggles for the Egyptians I met. The encounters with the white man, as some of my interlocutors told me, or with a wide range group of many migrants and refugees from across the globe, not only from the Middle East or the Arab region. So exile is an experience of freedom as it is an effect of repression. I will show later in concrete examples that I encountered on my fieldwork. What I mean by undoing exile is about taking exile as a potential for self-growth and development. Exile can also be a space of widening what we mean by power relations for individuals, and it helps the exiled individual to rethink the planes of sovereign national politics and think of it beyond forms and acts of national citizenship. For example, Edward Said discusses what he calls the pressures of exiles. For Edward Said, basically exile is cannot be defined in a negative way, but exile brings what he calls like a multi-dimensional vision that gives intellectuals to think about social phenomena in many ways, not only on one way. Yassin al-Haq Saleh, who's a Syrian political exile, actually based in Berlin, also argues that exile is somehow a precondition for personal transformation and personal freedom. In exiles, for Yassin al-Haq Saleh, individual can exilify. He calls it exilification. Exilification is basically the process of changing the conditions of exile and making it one's home by trying to adapt, by trying to consider the new place as a new struggle for imagining different social relation, trying to care and establish oneself in the political realm in the somehow the host country, not only caring for example here, not only caring about politics in Cairo and Egypt, but also trying to engage with politics in Berlin. So it becomes somehow both sides are coming together. So exile is a place for forming transdiasporic and transnational relations with the other. It's also that the others become no longer others in this catalyst space of coming together, the encounter, talking and seeing politics somehow from below and from above. From below, that you are encountering people, understanding many issues, but from below you at some point the exile might not identify with any form of national like rigid static national entity. So, for example, like to mention some examples of what I mean by undoing exiles, like one of my interlocutors told me that he started to understand what is being a minority means once he reached Berlin. Back in Cairo, he was a young male from urban Cairo, a Muslim, a Sunni, almost from middle or upper middle class. But in Berlin, he started to see different forms of racism, not only against him, but also against other migrants, which made him to while thinking about power relation, he now is including the question of racism, that he was not encountering it back in Berlin, encountering back in Cairo. Now he's identifying with it. Another intellectual mentioned that he started to understand the Egyptian regime by every single day that he spends in exile, and his disbelief in national media. Once we are talking about now media, his disbelief in national media is becoming expanded more and more. He added that also he now understands or even feels what is the nature of the war in terror, that everything, basically the justification of repression in Egypt is all under the war in terror, but once you encounter those subjects that are being deemed as terrorists, you start to understand actually the nature of this discourse production of war and terror in a different way other than a nationalist way, let's say. Another intellectual, Ahlam, started to be involved in German politics. She started to have and form a political standpoint in issues related to refugees and minority rights in Germany. She participates in anti-racism demonstrations, volunteers for social work in refugee camps, and writes about their, she's also a journalist, so she writes about the exclusions in Germany. For another one, although exile is a hard and harsh experience, he claims that exile also enables him to see the big picture of the Egyptian politics, and by being outsider somehow you can see clearly what's happening on the ground and what's happening with your friends and relatives back in Egypt, but also he started to have this somehow comparative vision, if we can call it, by looking at different modes of politics in different countries, not only Egypt. So Egypt is becoming not the only country that exiles are caring about, but there are another modes of politics that they can identify with. My last example is one of my intellectual, Osama. He says he started not only to feel the working of powers, but also he starts to be aware of minority and LGBT rights once he became exiled because of this kind of encounter that I tried to talk about in the beginning. Also, in exile, there is, I think, a huge opportunity to be active on the digital space, because, as I said, Berlin is this place of freedom, and for example, you won't be arrested because of a post, as in Egypt now. So to conclude, my two complete points are that marginality and exile provide new and different yet contingent conditions of political becoming. The experience of exile might enable the exiles to rethink the planes of national and sovereign politics, widen the understanding of national citizenship. And exile is not only a way of liberating individuals, and of course is not only a way of punishing them, but also it is a way of understanding the nature of this punishment by themselves in a structure and a historical context, meaning that the remains and the legacies of 2011 revolution are negotiated anew in exile, in the sense of how my intellectual starts to understand them and have a wide understanding of what the relations of power might be. Yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward, of course, for the question and the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. It's a fascinating presentation, and obviously very heavy issues related to exile and the feelings of loss and everything, as we're coming now very, very soon to the 10-year anniversary of 25th January. So I think there'll be a lot to discuss after. Now we'll turn to Diana.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'll share my screen, but it's really much more of a visual aid than anything else. So my name is Diana Abbas, and I'm one of the co-founders of Impact Lebanon, and I'm also on the team that's working on the Sauti initiative that I'll introduce a little bit later today. So really briefly, Impact Lebanon is a nonprofit organization that is based in the UK, and it really serves as a hub for initiatives that deliver impact for Lebanon by really building a community that really expands beyond London or the UK. And we have members of the community across the globe of the Lebanese diaspora. And really the purpose of this community is to encourage brainstorming of ideas, sharing of resources and knowledge across the members of the community, and really build strong teams to turn ideas into initiatives that deliver impact in Lebanon. So today my presentation is really going to be about walking you through how Impact Lebanon presents a new model for civic engagement, and how we took a lot of the phenomena we saw early on in the Lebanese revolution and how the diaspora was energetic and engaged and in a really grassroots way, and try to build an institution around it such that this kind of energy can continue to be channeled in a sustainable manner. So really this really defines a lot of the culture of Impact Lebanon, and I think you'll see throughout the presentation that really if a movement is to have impact, it must belong to those who join it and not just those who lead it. So we put quite a bit of thought into the structure. So I'll explain a little bit of how we came together, and then what we learned and how we institutionalized a lot of our learnings. So initially, the community came together on October 18th, so the day after the Lebanese revolution started, and it was a time of uncertainty. Nobody knew what was going to happen next, but we did know we wanted to, as a Lebanese diaspora, show solidarity with the protests happening in Lebanon. So really, we came together to plan these protests, and then we were quite overwhelmed with the number of people who joined and who had different ideas and felt that this time was different, that we were going to be able to capitalize on the energy of the diaspora to really make an impact and find a way to channel their energy. And so a lot of people reached out to us with varying ideas on initiatives they wanted to pursue for Lebanon. Some of these ideas included a website that chronicles the protests or the events that were happening in Lebanon, also sheds light on a lot of the art and the music and all of that emerged during the revolution, but also shedding light on how the diaspora has been engaged and what activities the diaspora has been up to. And social media seems to be a theme here today. So another initiative that emerged is an Instagram page that delivers facts about corruption in Lebanon or in the Lebanese political regime in bite-sized ways for a wide audience to be able to learn more and become more aware of a lot of that. And then everybody was interested in different things, so we started organizing seminars. Initially, we started in London, so there were some on constitutional law, others on the revolution, the economic crisis, the environment. We had a lot of fundraising events, and we realized that new people were joining every time we held a new event or activity or seminar. And so really the key learning is, how do we institutionalize this phenomenon in a sustainable way where we are able to attract Lebanese people across the world to join this community? And so we realized that, in studying the scene and seeing what Lebanese diaspora had been doing, there were quite a few organizations that existed in the diaspora that brought together the Lebanese community, but these were always largely based on profession or alumni status or university students, etc. There was never really one kind of space that brings together all the Lebanese communities in different countries around the world to deliver impact for Lebanon. And so in order to be able to continue attracting people, we set up the organization in a way where we shied away from predefining the verticals of what we worked on. So we didn't say that we'd only be working on the environment or political activism or whatever it is, because we really wanted to create this space that makes volunteering accessible to as many Lebanese people in the diaspora as possible. And different people have different professional backgrounds, different interests, and they would join for different purposes. Some of these examples are one of, so we hadn't done for a few months anything about the environment, but one of the people who had joined the community was really interested in waste management, and that was kind of what he was doing, what his education was about. So he organized a seminar on waste management in Lebanon, and from that seminar emerged a new initiative that was the Environment Academy, whereby Lebanese in the diaspora joined teams, remotely in Lebanon who were identifying environmental problems in their town or their village and, helping them build a proposal and implement it and fundraise for it. So because of this flexibility, it's possible for new initiatives to pop up from, places we wouldn't really expect. So the second thing really is, how do we create a working culture that is fluid enough to, to build on, everything, to identify needs quickly, to build on people's interests, etc. So again, when we go back to how we started, a need was identified to organize protests in London to support the protests in Lebanon, or show solidarity. So that need was identified, and we realized that people really just identify gaps that exist and jump in and do what's needed. And I think that was a really key learning, that people will step in when a gap is identified and when they're given the space to do that. And more importantly, when they identify their own need and find their own role, they feel ownership over the results they're delivering for Lebanon. And that seems to be a really effective way to go about things. So we liked what we saw, and we wanted to institutionalize that within Impact Lebanon as well. And so the way that we did that is we defined the whole organization around initiatives. So it was less about bringing people together because they have a common background or a common goal, but really because they wanted to do work for Lebanon. And so because the focus really was on working and delivering, people were in that mindset, which really allowed for a lot of flexibility to do a few things. So one, to go online, because that seemed to be necessary after COVID, and we really didn't want the momentum of the diaspora engagement and support to Lebanon to stop. So a lot of the initiatives that we had been planning on the ground, so we had planned an exhibition for different art that emerged from the revolution, to sell it. The proceeds would go to artists, and then the profits would go to NGOs in Lebanon. So we took that online, and it turned into an initiative called Dekene, which is an online store that sells art from various artists in Lebanon and design, and then the proceeds go to them, which is really key because of the economic crisis happening right now in Lebanon. So it's a way kind of to do both, improve livelihoods, but also be able to make profit and donate to people in Lebanon. So quite a few of the initiatives happened like that. So the seminars turned into webinars, debates turned into online debates, etc. And then I think that the same thing that happened early on in the protests happened again on August 4th, when the horrifying explosion happened in Lebanon. The need was identified, and I think because we had this, institutionalized this concept of just letting people identify their needs and stepping into work, we were able to act really quickly and set up a fundraiser where we raised 7.5 or 6.5 million pounds for the relief after the explosion in Lebanon. And so people really did jump in immediately when they saw that the fundraiser was setting up, and they formed teams somewhat organically. So teams to vet the different organizations we'd be funding, to work out the money transfer, etc. And so really this proved to be effective, that people are, people in the diaspora really have this desire to work, they just need the space to do it. The third thing we realized, again, early on, because we had mentioned like how many people actually got in touch, we felt that we needed to connect the Lebanese community together, both within each of the cities, but also across the world. And so we tried to think of ways. We held town halls, multiple events to bring people together. And then when COVID happened, we used a digital platform to bring everybody together into one space, and it's Slack really, where people are able to connect with each other, form teams organically, and deliver on initiatives together. So not only was the point to connect individuals to each other, but to connect initiatives to each other, because there really are quite a few learnings within each of the initiatives, or potentials for synergies between them. So I'm going to talk about Sauti as an initiative later on, but one other initiative that we have is called Wajhat Nazar, and it's really a series of debates where experts, activists, and independent politicians in Lebanon are invited to this platform to debate topics that are very controversial or divisive in Lebanon. So today we actually have one that explores, is federalism the solution for Lebanon? And so we have a debate organized today. And so because a lot of political topics come up in these debates, there's a lot of synergies, in the future with the Sauti initiative that I'll be talking about. And finally, what's really important is every single one of our initiatives is in collaboration with groups in Lebanon. And we really see that that's the role of the diaspora, to support the needs of people in Lebanon. And there's really no shortage of needs at this time. So not only did the revolution happen, and the blast, and the financial crisis, and the COVID crisis in Lebanon right now. So we really do need to be, in touch with reality on the ground in Lebanon and connect with the organizations in Lebanon and have them kind of guide us on what the needs are and have us fill these gaps. So again, this is another, so as Impact Lebanon, we built a database of these partnerships that we've built throughout several initiatives and, connect people to each other or to the partners so that they can make their initiative work. And the final real kind of organizational element is rotation. So we started off as 10 to 15 people, and the community is, today, in terms of people working on initiatives, around 100 to 200 people. And then we have a wide audience as well. And so what's important is that this work is volunteer-based. And so the people have limited time capacities, or people have different skill sets as well to offer. So, so this idea of rotating leadership, we kind of institutionalized that, and that the board of directors has limited terms to really keep people engaged and keep people feeding into improving Impact Lebanon, and give them ownership of different elements of it, and opportunities to really showcase their skills and make an impact in Lebanon. So really, these are kind of the four things that happened organically that we institutionalized, and focusing on building a structure around the people it's meant for, as opposed to plugging people into a pre-existing structure, and a structure that attracts them to an organization that they can contribute to, that gives them a space to work and identify their own needs and take ownership, connect them to each other, to partners and initiatives, and make it possible to rotate, based on skill sets, interests, and time capacities. And really, this has brought about such a wide variety of initiatives, from fundraising for COVID to fundraising for the Beirut explosion relief, to a debate series, to webinars, an education initiative, a mentorship initiative where we connect Lebanese professionals in the diaspora with people in Lebanon seeking job opportunities or university opportunities abroad or remotely. And so there's so many, such a variety of initiatives that we were able to, make come to life because of this kind of structure. So one of these initiatives is the SOTI initiative, and it really kind of brings everything full circle, because Impact Lebanon came about as a grassroots political mobilization during the protests at the start of the revolution, and SOTI now is trying to rechannel that energy into what we see as the way for change in Lebanon, which is in upcoming elections, but also having people become more politically engaged, both in Lebanon, but primarily within the diaspora, because there's, people who leave tend to either feel hopeless about change in the country, or kind of become indifferent, or focused on other things, or just not have the information that they need to still contribute even though they're in the diaspora. So that's really the idea about the SOTI initiative, and it really demonstrates all of the things that we had just discussed are also manifested in the SOTI initiative. So what it is it's going to be a resource that provides information to people in the diaspora, but also in Lebanon, on how to vote, how to register to vote from abroad to set up voting centers, how to reclaim citizenship, because quite a bit of, there's a large Lebanese diaspora, a lot of whom have given up their citizenship or were born abroad and never got it in the first place. So a resource for all this information, but also a resource to inform about how parliament works, how government works, how election works, how they affect you, why your vote matters, so that kind of thing. And then the platform, which also again built on the need to connect people. So it's really a platform where the Lebanese diaspora can find ways to connect with some of the alternative political parties that have emerged, that aim to break the status quo. So a platform for them to engage and voice their demands and their expectations from the candidates they will hopefully vote for in 2 years or a year and a half. But also a platform to connect to each other, to share ideas on how they're each doing awareness about elections and about political engagement within their own communities in different cities around the world. And it's also, so really it's a movement that, because of the resources they're given and the platform they're given, it turns into a movement because you have Lebanese people in the diaspora in so many cities in the world, raising awareness and growing the community that's focused on Lebanon. And really the Lebanese diaspora is quite large and present in so many cities, and it's really important for those of us who became active after the revolution to realize that not the entire diaspora is like this, and it's really a very, very Lebanese community, very diverse, and we need to, kind of bring them all in to, believe in Lebanon again in a way. So really that's what SOTI is, and it really fits within a lot of the values that Impact Lebanon has operated on and a lot of the mechanisms. So, that's it. That's it for me. And, hopefully you guys can visit Impact Lebanon and Sauti and see some of the initiatives that we're working on. And, this is something that I believe can be replicated across the different diasporas across the world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Diana. There's so many different things there as well in terms of the way you've been able to create this new model. I'm glad we had a little bit of time for you to be able to go into some of those details. I'm going to actually start by asking a few questions. I'm actually going to pick up with you first, Diana, about what you just said, because that was one of the things that came to my mind as you were speaking is, how easily could this be replicated in the case of other post-2011 Arab diasporas. And I think about things like the issue of repression and the inability for people to use a lot of public platforms because it actually can put them into danger. And this is something that's actually quite common. But also the question of division. Some of the research that we've been doing on different diasporas post-2011, whether it's the Libyan or the Iraqi, is that there's such a degree of polarization because of conflict dynamics and how people carry those conflicts with them when they go into diaspora, that it's actually quite difficult to bring people together. So I'm wondering if you have any insights or lessons learned from your own experience with Impact about that, about how to bridge those gaps and how this could be replicated in other cases. Then for Saeed, I had a question about where Egyptians in exile, where they project themselves politically in the coming years. And I ask this because some of the work we've done with the Egyptians that are located in Berlin, and just conversations we had, the feeling of loss and guilt is actually quite important. I imagine you came across that as well in your research, and that there's maybe a bit of difficulty to know about whether or not they can project themselves politically towards Egypt again, whether or not activism can pick up. And some people say it can, and it needs to be time, and other people feel like maybe this really is forever done and the door's closed. I'm just wondering from your own work, if you could comment on that and this idea of how can we see ourselves as actors towards Egypt today. And then finally for Zaina, I'm wondering a little bit about the resource sharing. When you were talking about the knowledge sharing as an important aspect of this and learning about each other's experience and this getting rid of this atomization that happened as a result of the authoritarian regimes. And I'm wondering about if there's any discussion where you're realizing from other people, oh, this is something we could do, or this is a way we can do this. This is how it worked for you, and learning from each other's own experiences in a way, if that's an important element that's coming out in the Citizen Academy. And also if there's an ability to build on each other's resources in terms of co-mobilization for each other's causes and things like that. If it's not just creating maybe spaces, but also really bringing different initiatives together so that we have these new forms of co-mobilization, co-solidarities going forward. So maybe we'll start with those questions, then we'll open it up. And again, for those who are joining us, you can type your questions in the Q&A. We already have some questions actually from the panelists from panel 1 towards our speakers in panel 2 as well. And also for those in Facebook Live, just to type the questions into the chat section. So, maybe Diana,
so I guess I'll start. So I think the polarization is really not unique to a lot of the countries that, Arab countries, and Lebanon is a unique scenario because it's not exactly polar opposites in a sense, but it's a really fragmented society with different sects, religions, ideologies that all kind of are lumped together. And this is, kind of part of the reason why we're here. And we have these really strong differences in opinion, and this is something that we're exploring in the debate series that I had mentioned earlier. Today we're exploring federalism, so we're entertaining the option of dividing up a really small country even further based on maybe indirectly or directly, but based on sects. So in the diaspora, this diversity in opinions and polarization kind of stays there. And so I really think it's a matter of thinking about the goal. So we want a country that serves me and you despite the differences in our opinion, and how do we get there? So that's, I think, one thing. And so we've in a way, I wouldn't say apolitical, but we've kind of separated the politics from the divisions, and so it doesn't matter what you believed before. It doesn't matter what political party you supported. It doesn't matter how you grew up or how differently that we grew up. We want the country, we want what's best for the country. And so whatever way you can think of to do that, go ahead. And so another way to kind of reduce polarization is to give people ownership of what they're doing. So and I think that kind of encourages people to feel like I have my own opinions, but I'm still able to make an impact. So that's another thing, and really focusing on the values. So everybody who joins our community has to kind of fill out an application form, and they really just have to agree to some of the values that we've put up there and consent to them. And once we at least achieve that common thread, there must be a common thread across any of the populations despite polarization. So once we agree on that common thread and then decide we're going to turn our differences into a healthy discussion, if any, and really focus kind of on the goal and on these values, no matter what they look like to all of us. So I think that's really a way to bridge the gap and not really, judge people based on what they supported before or what side of the aisle they're on, but really, focus on, do you want to take action and provide them with the space to do that. And I think that really helps, people working together really helps reduce the polarization.
Okay, thank you. Syed?
Thank you for the question. So regarding the point of projection, I would say it's different for everyone, or it's different for collectives somehow, because I was talking about somehow some certain individuals, not like a certain collectives. So I would answer your question in that sense. For example, some exiles started to bring their families, and they already applied for refugee status, which means that it's a long way to go back to Egypt. Let's put it that way. So they brought their families and they started to create a new life in Berlin. So some of them were migrants before 2011. Exiles are not only the one who forced to escape or to flee after 2013, but some of them just found themselves cannot go back because of the activism in the diaspora. But at the same time, it's somehow impossible for them not to project and position themselves towards Egypt and towards the political situation in Egypt, because for them activism is somehow an existential question that defines and redefines them every day because of their situation. Also because some of them have their families in prison in Egypt, or disappeared, or being harassed by the regime. So it's both ways, I would say. And for people who try to avoid let's say the political solution, or being involved in activist projects, their careers and their life choices are somehow political or connected to politics. For example, people who started in doing research, who went to Berlin for studies, for doing art projects, etc. Although it could be seen as an individual project, but also they are, by a way or another, are political choices regarding the context, the collective context that we are living now in Egypt. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Zaina?
Yes, thank you, Sarah, for a very good question, because this is definitely was one of our intentions, is to kind of activate this cross-national collaboration and solidarity. It's a bit too early now to say like the final outcomes, because we're kind of midway, and of course with the Corona situation, it prevented more interaction between the participants. But we could already see it because part of the academy is for each participant to kind of come up with a project or an initiative that would strengthen their existence in the public debate, as I mentioned. And we already saw like some participants grouping together to talk about one topic across different countries, for example, gender and sexuality. from Syria to Palestine, and another wants to talk about narratives about countries in war while also screening films from different countries. So I think, yes, we see this is happening, and it's already like there's just a value by having people sitting in the same room and exchanging these conversations and saying, okay, we say this about, we use this word to describe this in Yemen, how do we say it in Algeria, and people just also exchanging cultural references and information about public figures and songs that we haven't heard from each other before. So we see it developing, of course, as a natural kind of progress of the academy, but of course we're looking forward to see the final achievements and how each participant would find their own way, and also how we continue to keep these connections after the academy, of course, this network.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll turn to some of the questions now. So there was a question, and this is from Ehab to El Said, and it's about a little bit about your methods, actually, how you found or located your informants, a little bit about their sociological profiles, their gender and age, and the length. How, are these very in-depth, long interviews? Is there participant observation, things like that?
Thank you, Ihab. So for me, it's always hard to find the interlocutors in the sense of it's a political question as well, because of the mistrust that is there. So it has been always through friends or through introductions of friends to trust me. I myself don't go back to Egypt, and this, I found also this was about. This was a point of shared trust somehow, that they perceived me, because I cannot go back to Egypt as well. So this is how I found, or how I get introduced to them. I also attended a workshop in Berlin. It was actually about exiles, and in which also I got to know other people. I found also others in Beirut in a conference. So it has been like this, not a systematic way, because in Berlin, Egyptian disappears, even if there are many, they disappear. I mean, you cannot see them visually, like, for example, Syrians in Istanbul, for example. And this is a question of numbers. Regarding the age, the people I met was from, let's say, from 20 to 40. And 45 was an exception. I met with an exile who was 60. And was a very long history since the 80s, activist history since the 80s in Egypt. The gender, I met with more male than females, and I think this was because of the length of the fieldwork and the time of the fieldwork. Because also I was in September 2019 there, in which there was some demonstration, because some demonstration is happening in Egypt because of Muhammad Ali calls for demonstrations. So for me, I would say the easier opportunity or people I managed to contact and they replied me was males, because of the length also of my field work was around 2.5 months or 3 months, different from, for example, my field work, my doctoral field work now, which is 1 year. It brings in different perspective in terms of which kind of people I will talk to. The last point is about the interviews. So each interviews, I would say between 2 hours to 5 hours at least. Sometimes I met with some of them like frequently, 2 or 3 times. Most of them are friends now, so we talk like friends. We talk generally, but yeah, I was interested more in seeing this kind of life story and in exile, not only like as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, that talking about ongoing exile and political activism is only one dimension of the whole discussion, or the whole project and experience of exile. Yeah, I hope I answered you.
Okay, thank you. And then there's a question also from Thomas to all the panelists, which is about something that he brought up, which is increasing demobilization since 2011. And if you could comment on that, is this something that you are seeing, especially for maybe the two panelists, Zaina and Diana, who are themselves in the activist community, very much a part of that and creating initiatives in the activist community. Are you seeing trends of demobilization, or are you actually seeing increasing mobilization?
Maybe I can start with Norway, but again, I mean, I'm not an academic. I haven't done any research, so it's difficult to come up with a conclusion. But from what I observed is also from our interaction with the people we see is that, yes, in general, a lot of the Syrian people who would come to our events were a bit skeptical. Many of them were so tired of talking about Syria. I mean, it's very difficult now to make a generalization because we don't have numbers or statistics, but many people said, we see it that if we have something that is very political in the debate, like if we're talking about human rights violations or, when areas were under siege or the bombing, like these topics that I think people feel just so helpless about, there would be very few people actually attending and interacting. So mobilization in this very maybe traditional way of political movements or political politically inspired protests, yes, it was not like a huge, I wouldn't say it's like, yeah, you wouldn't reach like hundreds of people. It would be maybe a couple of tens of people if we would go for a protest or even have an event where we're inviting, again, that's why we would then for a specialist audience, like talking to NGOs and research institutes, because we would see the interested. However, when we do it again through arts and culture and films, people would be much more. And I also actually saw a tendency of also, again, arrived recently in Norway, that they're also doing a lot of initiatives. However, again, with the different genre than this traditional political mobilization, would have start bands for music, this fusion between Eastern and Western music, or doing also organizations or initiatives to help newly arrived students in Norwegian universities and high schools, and how to kind of find do all the process, the bureaucracy in their certificates and all of that. So I see a lot of mobilization, but maybe kind of branching out in different directions. The original one that we started with in 2011.
So I'll jump in here. Our date is different. So in Lebanon, it doesn't start in 2011. It really starts in October 2019. And so, mobilization has boomed massively since then in a way that we've never seen before in the diaspora. We've never seen an engaged Lebanese diaspora. And back in 2015, when there were some protests in Lebanon, a few protests were mirrored across the diaspora, but there was never really such a large organized effort. And really, Impact Lebanon is not the only, kind of diaspora community in this space. There's quite a few that have emerged. And then even when we talk about Sauti and we talk about mobilization for elections, but also putting together a new political vision for Lebanon, there's some amazing initiatives that we're partnered with, like Nahwa Watan is one of them. So you've really seen a massive, uprising of the diaspora, not only from a political perspective, but also from a fundraising perspective. And it's, honestly, like if I'm a representative, this past year, I think I've spoken to more Lebanese people than I have abroad, than I have my whole life in Lebanon collectively. So if that's any indication of anything, that's really an indication of a really new and very inspiring and hopeful phenomenon in the Lebanese diaspora, particularly.
For me, I would say I think of my presentation as not negating the argument of the increasing demonization at all. So I really identified with Ihab's presentation and Thomas' anthropological perspective on diaspora. So my first point is not my contribution was not to aim to negate or should not be revealing of this negation, because I have to admit, yes, there is increasing demobilization, at least in the Egyptian diaspora, I believe, as I saw it. But also the second point is it depends, I think, on the time of the field work, or the time when we're looking at it, and the time also of which year exactly. As I said, in 2019, which was a rare moment in Egypt and in the diaspora, after years and years of repression and no protest, with the protests that happened in Egypt, a few protests that happened in Egypt, the diaspora became active, and I attended three demonstrations in front of the Egyptian embassy and elsewhere. So my second point is when. The third and the last point I would say is you yourself, Thomas, mentioned that somehow the notion of activism and mobilization became expanded, or we need to expand it somehow. For example, people who are working on human rights human rights organization, it's their everyday life to be involved in what's happening there. But at the same time, exiled academics who organize academic seminar and conferences, political ones. For me, this is a form of activism as well. And also, I attended I met some people from two different, let's say, social movements, Egyptian ones. One's organized by the Muslim Brotherhood in Berlin, and the other organized by, let's say, a collective of leftist and liberal people. But usually they define their activism as conditional to and quote unquote in reaction to what's happening in Egypt. At least in the current moment of 2019, 2020. So the diaspora would be politically active, just and there are a huge wave of repression in Egypt. So yeah, I think my point, I hope I touched on your question.
Okay, thank you. I think that brings us actually to the end of the questions, unless anyone else from amongst the panelists has even questions for each other. No? Okay, well, there was just one other thing that it was a request. It wasn't so much a question, but a request from someone from the first panel, which was regarding the making the materials, your PowerPoint materials, accessible. So if that is possible, I just encourage people from the audience maybe to send an email to the Arab Reform Initiative, and I can put you in touch with the people. There is one question coming in now. Will report and publish findings. And the question, so there is yes, there is an effort. There's going to be an effort to convert these into a publication afterward, and to make the materials available. So yes, that will be forthcoming. And there's a question about the difficulties of starting and managing such successful projects. So this is a question, I think, specifically for Zeina and for Diana.
So again, I think I touched upon this in terms of if you structure the model around engagement and, really, I think building trust with the people that you're working with. So one of the times that I think was the most overwhelming for us was after the 4th of August explosion in the port of Beirut, when we had done fundraisers before for maybe 10,000 pounds, British pounds. And so that was kind of our initial goal. And then when we saw it really like exploding, and by the first night, so by midnight of the day of the explosion, we had raised 1 million pounds. We quite honestly weren't equipped to deal with that much amount of money, but to see just how much talent and how much passion there was in the Lebanese diaspora, and how people just jumped in to help where they best were suited. And instantly teams were formed, and each team was really focusing on, one full aspect and coordinating among them. So yes, it can be stressful and it can be difficult at times, but it's, the best thing is to see when new people are joining in and really taking ownership and driving initiatives forward. It's kind of like passing the baton in a way, and it becomes a lot more manageable, I think, to deal with initiatives that gain a success, to really trust the team. And I think the team is really central to a lot of the work that we do.
Yes, thank you for a good question as well. I think some challenges are just ongoing. They never disappear, like the question, I guess, of meaning and impact and why are we doing this. I mean, everything we've seen in the region has just gone from bad to worse, and it's indeed very depressing just to think about the big picture and the economy and the war and displacement and yeah, in all the Arab countries. So maybe this is also our way of just kind of trying to find refuge in these small changes, or like trying to think that, you know, small is beautiful, or like the butterfly effect, whatever it's called, is that we're inspiring someone. We're inspired all the time by others who keep on doing this. And as I said in the beginning, we look all the time for, not we look, but we come across all the time, we come across initiatives in diaspora, and we think it is something also kind of comes from our responsibility as privileged exiles or diasporic members to keep on talking and remembering, you know, the narrative, how everything started, why we ended up here, and to also make sure that ordinary people have their voices in such places, such arenas. And maybe for the future, you never know what can come out of this. I don't know. It's just like, I think all the philosophical questions for us could be the biggest challenges. Of course, I'm not going to talk about the institutional and funding and all of that. That is part, I guess, of any initiative that is young and small in Europe. But yeah, I think these questions for us are the most persisting ones. And it's never easy to find an answer and to feel happy and satisfied and proud. But we try. When we do these small things and we see people are really, really happy and really inspired, and they tell us, keep on doing this, I think this is what keep us going.
Okay, thank you. There's a question coming in for El Sayed, which is about, and this is a big question. So it's about, to what extent can diaspora members participate in the making or creating of a new political reality in Egypt? And maybe you take a long view, you know, maybe not just this year, but taking a more long-term view.
To what extent, I really don't know, but also one point is to stress now by this question is that I also, I didn't meet, I saw a pro-regime diaspora in Egypt in the sense of they have like regular meetings with the, or at least that's the talks about the pro-regime diaspora. They have regular meeting with the diaspora. There is a effective atmospheres of spies that are everywhere, complete mistrust. And also this pro-regime diaspora is being mobilized once there is an official presidential like invite or visit to Berlin, for example. So I don't know also if this will be included in the diaspora in this question or not, but I would, one of the points that I would say is building on the first one, the idea of digitalized diaspora. I think the diaspora is already playing a role in somehow shaping, let's say, or trying to shape a particular narrative other than the formal one, either in the through the media that we saw, or through the digital space, which also the digital space is one of the contested spaces in Egypt, because also there is the digital impression. So I would say this notion of the activism on media might give a vision on the role of different political perceptions and awareness, not particularly reality in the physical and material sense.
Okay, thank you. And we have a question, maybe it's the last one coming in from Facebook, actually. And it says, you know, aren't all people in all these different countries, people are all having these uprisings, having these mass protests, essentially for the same types of issues and the same types of aspirations. So the question is there a collaboration at the regional level that we can imagine, and especially among youth? You know, maybe just sort of concluding remarks maybe from the three panelists about this.
I think there's certainly a lot of value in connecting. I was going to suggest that earlier, and just connecting and seeing what each other are doing, and trying to find ways to learn from each other or collaborate or work together. Especially that a lot of the regional issues tie into a lot of the politics in each of our countries, and so there's a lot of refugee populations in Lebanon, for example, that are part of our target to beneficiaries for whatever impact we want to have in Lebanon. So there's a lot of common themes, but there's also a lot of regional implications that I think we can learn from each other and really maybe work together as well. I definitely would recommend and encourage that.
For me, yes, absolutely. There is this sense of collaboration among the youth or the young people, not only regional, but also regional relation, especially if we're talking about Berlin, when I said that you see people from everywhere, and especially when you start to identify yourself as a refugee or as an exile by seeing different people as refugees and exile, and start doing something together, participating in Berlin, there are a lot of political gatherings are going on, and during these meetings and gathering, always there are potentials and collaborations in that sense, at least in the individual and personal. At least in the personal level. Yeah, that's would be my answer.
Yeah, I think I'll just echo what both Sayed and for us, it's also like the kind of work we do is always and kind of analysis that comes out of the region and by different platforms. So we always also have kind of these informal consultations with people that we get inspired from, and we follow their work, whether it's like Al-Jumhuriyya, for example, as an online magazine, or we follow the work of Afaq, which is the Arab Fund for Arts and Culture. We also see their events in different places. Also these, and we sometimes call and have Zoom calls with festivals that already took place to kind of take their expertise. So I think these, maybe they're a bit informal at this point, these kind of collaborations, but I guess they're just also inseparable from the way we work and how we also formulate our ideas and our goals and our ambitions for the activities that we do. So yes, definitely it's a key element, I guess, of our work, at least.
I wanted to jump in, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to jump in, and I remembered one of the webinars that we organized was a comparative analysis between the revolution in Lebanon and the revolution in Iraq that were happening kind of at the same time. So there's a lot of these opportunities, I think, to learn from each other's experiences, whether within the country or within the diaspora. For sure.
Yeah, just Zena made me also remind me, also in Berlin now there is the Nawara initiative, or NGO, which is like a queer feminist group of people trying to organize political events, conferences, and seminars, which is also, for me, this is starting to emerge, and at least in Berlin, and also other human rights initiatives also that are is being emerging.
May I add just a little point? I mean, yes, they actually learn a lot from each other, and it's not only the individual, but yeah, I would love to talk about YouTube programs and the satire programs as well today, but because of the time limited, we can see in YouTube, they are really learning a lot from each other. When we talk about satire programs, we can see the Iraqi one, Bashir Show. It's exactly the same concept like Joe Show, and a third one, a Syrian Lebanese satire programs. So they are really really learn a lot from each other. When we go to Istanbul, we find in the same building, in the same studio, Al Arabi TV, and which they produce a Joe show, and we find the Iraqi diaspora TV. So Istanbul, they are so close, in almost in the same area, the different studios. So they learn from each other. They are trying to cooperate. There are Iraqi TV stations, Syrian TV stations, Egyptian TV stations, Yemeni TV stations, Libyan TV stations, and all of them, they are actually regime critical media, which they learn a lot from each other. You know, and I would like to end with to say, really many thanks for all of you. It has been a great day for me. So, thank you. And I learned a lot.
Thank you. And with that, I think we're going to conclude our conference. So I want to thank all the speakers from this panel, the 3 speakers, but also the Mediatized Diaspora Project and your speakers. This has been a very, very thorough, rich day. And I do think we will be producing some sort of conference report or findings or papers from this. That is the goal in any case. I know everyone is very busy despite everything that's going on in the world. The work continues and there's always more to do, but we will find a way to get things published for everybody. And hopefully this will also contribute to this cross-fertilization, this learning, both for academia and for knowledge production, but also for stimulating and inspiring future activism. So thank you all so much. I wish you all a very nice evening, or for those coming from the other side of the Atlantic, a nice afternoon. Goodbye.